Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next podcast in the series of Talking Leadership. This is Eric Perez welcoming you, and today I'm joined in WA. You're in WA at the moment,
Yes,
Brett?
yes. Sitting quietly at home in my office. Yep.
Excellent. So, everyone, I'd like to introduce Brett McCallum. Brett has many decades' experience in the commercial fishing industry in Australia. He is currently a consultant to the industry, and he is also an AFMA commissioner. So, welcome, Brett.
Thanks, Eric. Nice to be here.
Excellent. Okay, so the to get into the purpose of this, I'm trying to create a bank of information around people's leadership experiences, and so I'll begin with the question I'm asking everyone is, can you cast your mind back to the first time you were in a leadership role, and why did you take that role on?
Well, I was quite lucky in my early part of my career in the fishing industry that the company I was working with um, had a number of representative positions that it needed people to fill, and I probably stepped back the slowest when they asked for volunteers, and so I was probably cast into a role in an industry association. That was my first opportunity to do that. I was only 21 at the time, in an industry that had a lot of old time pioneers and legends of the fishing industry here in WA. So um, I was there for about 12 months on that particular association, and they decided that they wanted a young person to be the chair of that association. So I was given that particular job fairly early, and so from that perspective, that was my first leadership role as the chair of an industry association in WA.
So, did you take that role on because you were obviously asked to do it, or did you see it as an opportunity to do other things into the future?
It was a bit of both. At the time in the early 80s was when industry government consultation processes were just being established in fisheries around Australia, and Western Australia was probably leading the way with management advisory committees and other representative roles which were new. And so I had a particular interest in that area. My The company I had at the time promoted me as being someone they wanted to learn that, given I was a bit younger and coming through the process. So I saw it as a step up, a way to learn. The people around me were very supportive of what I was wanting to do, and they also wanted someone younger to be coming through. So it was a bit of a convergence of timing and opportunity, Eric, where they wanted someone younger to coming through the industry, which they didn't have at the time, and I was lucky enough to be around at a time when the industry and government were building that particular relationship, which is now commonplace in fishing. So it was a bit of both.
Okay, so and this is through any phase of your leadership journey, I guess, is do you see a difference, or is there a difference between leadership and management in your estimation?
Yeah, I think and leadership has a whole range of different definitions in my view. Some people think leading is you jump out front and race ahead and people follow you. I'm a bit more of the view that leadership is empowering the people around you and helping them to understand the issues, to think about what they're doing, get them information, and then try and make some decisions where they're all moving forward at the same time. And then they need someone, obviously, to represent them and help them to move down the next part of the spectrum, which I see leadership certainly in the fishing industry that way. Management, I think, can be someone who then takes the strategy and takes the decisions that have been made and make sure that they happen. So it's a bit like an entrepreneur, I think, is someone who builds an idea, comes up with the basis of the business, and then sets it up. The manager then is the person who comes in and runs that business on a day-to-day basis, and the entrepreneur or a leader moves on to the next issue. So I think there is a little bit of a difference, but I very much of the view you can't be a good leader unless you're good at managing people as well. And my approach in all of my stuff that I do is to empower the people around me, empower the people I represent so that they can make the decisions. And if they're happy for me to then implement those on their behalf, that's pretty much what I've done.
Okay, so in that context, in that you're dealing with people and you're trying to empower them, sometimes, or depending on the industry you're in, you'll make mistakes. How do you own a mistake, Brett, when it's attributed to your leadership?
Oh, pretty much. I think you grab it and try and work out what happened. I think if you let a mistake fester, or an error fester, or a decision that you've made hasn't gone in the right direction, then it's only going to make life worse for whatever you're doing, and especially in the roles I've played where you're representing other people's perspectives and other people's livelihoods. It's best to get that issue out in the open, resolve it, and learn from it. So I'm very much of the view that you accept them, try and find out how you could have done it better, what you did wrong, and then try and resolve that and move forward.
So, and I've heard this only in a couple of the podcasts. I just want to tease out one thing you said there, that timing is essential. So getting onto that mistake and getting it fixed up or cleared up or whatever the solution to moving on from that is time dependent in your experience?
Well, I think logic tells you it has to be. If it's a mistake, then it's not going to achieve your ultimate goal or your ultimate objective that you've obviously set up in your strategy. So if you've made a mistake, you've got to fix it because you won't move to your next phase that you want to succeed. So leaving it or hiding it or hoping it goes away doesn't help your long-term goal. So to me, it's determine it, find it, fix it, and get back on track.
Yeah, from my own experience, I have found occasionally when I've wanted to ignore a small mistake or a small error, and sometimes those ones are the ones that come to bite you back in a big bad way if you don't act on them. So where were you when I made that mistake, mate? You could have helped me out. But I think
I tried, but I think you're a bit busy yelling at someone at the
time. Thank you very much. So what do you find, Brett, is the most difficult part of being a leader?
Probably because the most difficult part, I believe, is getting everyone on the same page to some extent. And you don't always have to have that. The fishing industry is notorious for having maybe 100 fishermen and 110 different points of view. So you've got to be able to help all of those people understand what the issue is before them, and help them to see a way forward to resolve that. Now, many times people are quite entrenched in their views. It's their livelihoods that are at stake in many cases, and that brings specific types of pressures on them. You also have cultural issues within our industry, given strong Southern European influence here from the pioneers who came over in the 50s and the 60s. So to me, the most difficult part is to get information across to people so that they see it more as giving them the information they need rather than you trying to force a particular point of view upon them. And I think that part of building that, the way to get over that is to ensure that you've been around those people in the past, that they do trust what you're doing, what you're saying, how you're doing it, so that when you do bring a difficult issue forward to them, they understand that you're coming to them from the right direction, which is to make them aware of what's going on, to try and help them understand the issue, and to try and help them make a decision that they can move forward with their livelihood. I've seen leaders in the past where they come in and tell people what's good for them. I don't think that works. I think people have to be comfortable that they trust the person who is giving them the information, and they trust the person who's going to take the decision they've made forward on their behalf. And so it's very much understanding your clientele.
So
I think I think that also works with the people you're delivering the message to. and we're involved quite significantly with government. So a lot of my time as a leader in the fishing industry is to help the government agencies and other sector groups like recreational fishing to understand where my members are coming from, so that they better accept an alternative point of view, or at least a different perspective on something than they've got, and they respect that. They may not agree with it, but at least they respect that it's coming from a position where there's some substance and thought to what that particular position is, rather than just being an individual's view that they think's right for somebody else.
Yeah, that always brings with it its nuances. I know from what I know of your past working in WA, and what I have dealt with over here is when you're dealing with multiple stakeholder groups with different agendas, trying to get everyone onto the same page, or at least trying to sell your story, can be a difficult part about being a leader, because sometimes people don't want to hear your story. They just want an outcome that suits them, and that's I think it's an art form, and you have to work on it. I got to say, I've had more misses than hits in my career, but I guess you learn from that, and you work out just what politicking actually means as being part of a leader. So this kind of segues quite nicely into how do you measure success then, Brett?
Well, it's always a hard one, because I suppose in many ways success is you don't get sacked. So that's it's like a football coach, I suppose.
Sure.
I like to think that success is people's attitudes towards you. As a leader, I believe I've always had, and I use trust a fair bit. I think trust's a really important word in leadership, that people trust you to lead them. And if you've got their trust, then they will spend more time, I think, talking to you and opening up to you and working with you. And that's both the people that you work for, and in my case, the fishing industry, and the people who you're working to, and that's the other sectors, government, etc., is that you need to build a level of trust and a relationship. So I like to think that my ability to maintain the relationships with all those people, some recognition, I suppose, in other roles that perhaps have a more of a strategic or higher level view for the fishing industry, as some sort of levels of success. But a lot of my measurement is the sleep easy policy. If I can sleep easy at night, I feel fairly comfortable that I'm doing a good job at what I've been asked to do, and that people take the time to follow what you do, have confidence in what you do, and ask you to do other things. So I like to think that's the success models, rather than particular places or jobs that you've achieved up some sort of chain or something. That's not my style. It's nice to have people approach you on that, or it's nice to succeed in getting positions that you think you can be helpful for. But I think your peers and your colleagues around you and the people that you represent, having trust and faith in you, is the success level that I give.
So a couple of statements coming up, Brett. I'd like to get your take on these if I can. On the job experience develops better leaders.
Oh well, I think it does. Depending on, and again, it really depends on what particular role that you're going to play. I was when I first started work, I was working in a commercial fishing industry that built ships and exported prawns and lobsters, and had some international fishing partnerships. And so I was asked, given that they saw me as being a trainee manager and perhaps someone who's going to be long term within their company, I was asked to start to understand how the business worked. So we were working in factories and working in the shipyard and working in the accounts department. So there was a lot of experience at that level. So I understood when I got to a manager level or a bit more of a leadership role how the actual business worked. And I think that was important. and even now, I think in all the roles that I've played in the fishing industry, I've always made sure I get out and get to see how the coalface works and how the fishermen operate, what some of the issues are around their life and how difficult it is for them to participate in a lot of the off-water issues that I deal with and have a better understanding of what's doing. So to me, if you also get broader experience through trying different things in different places, maybe it's some professional development work you do or whatever, there's always things to learn from outside. It doesn't mean that a person has to have, let's say, been grown up in the fishing industry to be successful as a leader in the fishing industry. I think I always say to my fishermen, I've never been fishing. I'm not a fisherman. I've got 1,500 expert fishermen out there, which they all tell me they are all the time. So my expertise is in taking their views and putting them forward in a way that gets their message across to the people that they want to get that message across to. So quite often, I think external experience in other industries can assist where you bring in new ideas or try different things.
So in that vein, and I'm interested in this one in particular, formal education helps to develop better leaders.
Well, I have a commerce degree. The basis of that gave me flexibility in a variety of different ways to look at my longer term career. I probably came out of the era where you went from school to university to gain the next level. So that was sort of the culture at the time. I think education, and it really depends on what you call education. I think the school of hard knocks is also something very useful, and I've seen a number of people come through to get to various leadership roles who perhaps haven't spent the time getting their hands a bit dirty, and therefore don't have that feel for the particular area in which they're being asked to take some leadership role. I also think that a higher education area just provides you with some different ideas, some different approaches to things, maybe a bit of discipline and focus to what you do, gives you some structure around some of the longer term approaches that you might take to do things. So it's a mix, but I would always encourage people to continue to do development of their personal situation, whether that be a fisherman who wants to learn how to better prepare his own business arrangements, or wants to involve himself more or herself more in the fisheries management consultation process, through to executive officers of state industry associations who perhaps could go and do some more work on strategic development or company directorship or those sorts of things, which give them a broader feel for what they're looking at.
Yeah, so I'm interested in that response when you're the first to mention it this way about coming up through the ranks and sort of the school of hard knocks, or your experience in that role is what could shape you into a better leader just by being there and doing it. This is the next statement that I've got, and it's made some people laugh, and some people have been on the fence, and some are very one or the other. So I have a guess where you're going to go with this one, but I'm not going to say it out loud because it's about your view, not mine. So leaders are born, not made.
Yeah, no, I'm not a believer in that. I think, well, I don't know what a born leader looks like. I mean, I think people have a leader is sometimes a position you assume because people have some confidence in you for a variety of reasons, and that might be you may not be the best footballer in your team, but you're the person who the players might respect and be prepared to play as the captain because you demonstrate a particular approach to what you do, and they like that, and they're prepared to follow that. The best player might have the best skills and that sort of thing, but not be a person who brings some of the lesser skilled players through. So my view is a leader is something that can be developed. I think there is, it varies depending on the type of leader that the particular group that wants to be led deals with. Now, if it's you go back to the caveman days, and it was the person who could probably pull everyone together and pull down the biggest mammoth and drag people along and make the right decisions to move. So that whether that was a hierarchical thing or a family thing, or it was just something that evolved, I'm very much of the view that a person can develop their leadership skills, but they need to understand and take the time that leadership is what people bestow on you, I think, rather than the other way around.
Okay, and that in some senses, and I'm trying to paraphrase here, that it's the led that give you that position and that entitlement. Is that what you believe, that it's your people around you that give you that informal tick to be the leader, or is it more? Is it more than that?
Well, again, I think it's what you want, how you define leader. I think right back to the start. I think a leader is someone that people will follow, and a leader is someone who gives direction, and they're giving direction to others. So I think as a leader, you've got to have that respect of the people who are asking you to do those things, or are willing to work with you to move in that direction. So it's very much the people you're in your particular grouping, whether that be a sporting team or whether it be a country like the politicians, or whether it be a fishing industry association. The leader is someone that people want to work with and give confidence to being the person that they want to move their particular position or their particular decisions forward. So I think it's as much someone who can also encompass all the people in the group. I think people who lead and end up with groups breaking off in different directions, I think aren't really leading, that they're just tearing off in one direction, and some follow and some don't. I think a real leader brings everyone along with them.
Okay, so this next we're almost there. Not too many more questions, but this one I thought I'd leave towards the end. So I'm in the throes of what you might call being a early career researcher, and so part of my journey is to get some qualifications under my belt, and I'm looking at a thesis at the moment that says, based on the literature and based on what the current literature is telling me, is that strategic thinking and foresight are the core leader capabilities fit for future leaders. So the leaders of the future will need those two things as fundamental to being leaders in any industry, not just seafood or agriculture more broadly. What's your view of that, Brett?
Well, I think it goes back to my earlier comment about the difference between an entrepreneur and a manager, in my definitions. I think the managers in many cases are the people who maintain the day-to-day operation. It's important to keep the business running or the particular activity operating on its day-to-day basis. I think the entrepreneur or the strategic thinker is the person who's saying, okay, what's the next things we need to be thinking about? What are the longer term issues we need to prepare for? We've just done X, Y, Z. How do we move to A, B, C? What could happen now we've had this decision? So I think very much so that you need to constantly be thinking strategically and looking over the horizon, all the nice cliches that people have. What is it called? The future environment and all those sorts of words that are used around the place. But I just think that that's part of your job is to look forward to there, try and get a handle on where you think it might go. But then the important bit is to come back to your managers and to the people that you work with and get them to understand why you think that's the strategic approach that needs to be done. That's the direction that needs to be taken, get their views on it, and then set a plan for how to achieve that. And then next step is once you've done that, you're constantly thinking, well, if we get to this road, what's the branch we take? Is it to the right? Is it to the left? What are the blockages that we could come up against? What are the benefits we might find, and how do we deal with those? So I think you've also always got to be looking ahead and saying, what if, and preparing for how you might do that. Educate your people around you and hopefully bring them along the same track, or have them help you modify it to a position that you're all comfortable.
Sure. One of the podcast guests that I had, and you'd be aware of both these gentlemen, I think, Graham Turk and Artie Raptis, have said much of what you said, that these things are important, but what those two gentlemen have mentioned that kind of made me take a few steps back was that none of that strategic thinking or foresight is going to be of any use to a leader if they can't communicate what they're trying to do, and that as a capability in the leader is something critical. Have you found that in your travels, Brett, that being a good, skilled communicator is critical to operationalizing anything else that you're doing?
Oh, I think it is one of the most critical things, because all the information, excuse me, all the information you want to get across to people has to be communicated in some particular way. And I think my experience has been that communication of the same information might take a variety of different forms depending on the particular audience that you're trying to get that information across to. Fishermen are time poor. Sometimes there's literal and culture issues. So you have to think about how you do that. So you might deliver the same message to fishermen, to a government agency, and then through to a recreational sector in three different ways, all with the same message contained within it, to make sure that you get the message across properly. So my view has always been to go to the coalface. I spent a lot of time on the wharf, sitting on a boat one-on-one with fishermen. I find that's a very positive way of getting information to them. Sitting down over a cup of tea in their house is one way where they feel comfortable, and I think you've got to make it a situation where they're comfortable. Big groups, large forums, a mix of bureaucracy and fishermen together doesn't always work. And so it's to me it's then the same message you might have to formulate in a different way through a more detailed submission type approach to a bureaucracy. So communication is critical, and I think there's a lot to be done from government agencies back to industries where they could improve that communication role by using intermediaries like fishing associations and peak bodies as the trusted networks to do that, which I don't think they do very well at the moment.
That's a fairly mixed bag, and that's a topic area we could talk about ad nauseum, but I won't bring fisheries management into this. So the last question, Brett, and this is one that stumped a few people, but I'm hoping you've got the ultimate answer for this, is what would you say to a younger version of Brett McCallum about being an effective leader?
I think I would tell a younger version of myself to slow down a bit in my early days. I think that's a natural thing for younger people. I was given a reasonably senior role as a peak body CEO here in WA at 26. So that was that was a bit of early stage. And I thought, I've got to get in here and make my mark. So what I learned was that I'd fire off all my ammunition at the first sign of the enemy, and they actually ducked, and none of it hit them, and then I had nothing left. So I suppose I learned to slow down, certainly listen a lot more, take the time to understand other people's perspectives, and not necessarily want to argue back with them straight away. I also learned about, I would tell my younger self to spend a little bit more time on the communication and education role of my members. That's difficult at times because I think they've employed someone and they say, well, you know what we want, go ahead with it. But as you might have found, sometimes you do that and they come back and say, why did you do that? So I think I would spend a little bit more time taking my message out to the people a bit more. And the final thing is probably just to do one thing at a time as best you can, and not try and have 400 things in the air, trying to think you can do them all at the same time. And then eventually it takes longer to do them all than if you had to just concentrate on one at a time. So
that's
so it's
always a problem with prioritizing your life as a leader or CEO or manager or whatever your role is that sometimes everything seems to have equal priority, and that can spell disaster sometimes. Everything you're saying, it sort of echoes in my head as, yeah, you try and do too much too quickly, and I think the quality tends to drop off in what you're doing, and also you miss the bigger picture because there's so much clutter in the way that you don't see the forest for the trees, and that to me, and I've heard it a few times, and it tends to ring true. So look, Brett, I appreciate your time today. I'm hoping that I can catch up with you in later podcasts, because what I'm finding with each person that I'm speaking to, and again, I do appreciate your time, is that I've got other questions that creep up in my mind that I want to talk about, but I'm not going to take up an hour of your time. And I think I can expand what we're doing with the podcast, because there's a wealth of experience that I think you and others can share if you're prepared to,
Sure.
that people don't get by reading a journal article or going to the one of 1,000 different leadership courses that are out there. I don't see this happening, and I'm hoping that I can create a bit of a buzz, showing people that, look, these are some leadership nuggets of gold that people across different industries are prepared to share. Sit down for 20 minutes and listen to someone explain what their leadership pathway was. Now, I'm not saying every question I've asked you covers the entirety of what leadership is, but for me, this is the start of an ongoing, interesting conversation that I think leaders need to have more amongst themselves in as what do you call it, as a non-confronting way as possible, because everyone, like yourself, and you fit the mold beautifully, is that you get comfortable and you start really thinking about where you came, how you came up, and what things are important to you. And one thing that Artie Raptor said to me in one of the podcasts was, be your authentic self, because in this industry, as in the fishing industry, and I would hope that this is the same in most industries, is that you will trigger people's BS radar quite quickly if you're not invested in what you're doing.
Absolutely. Especially in this fishing industry. I mean, there's no hierarchy between the people who are catching and the decision making. It's quite a flat structure, and they've got excellent BS radars.
and they get more attuned as they stay longer in this industry. So I was told, I don't know who you met first in your travels in industry, but when the first fisherman that I came across actually stopped me in my tracks and said, "You'll get on in this industry." He used the word boy a few times, which really irked me, because I was in my early 30s, but he was probably in his mid 60s, and he said, "Don't bullshit to us and you'll get far. If you tell lies, people will pick it up straight away." And
no, I think that's, as I think we said earlier about, if you make a mistake as a leader, I think you fess up and you get on with it, and people appreciate the fact that you've recognised it, owned it, talked about it, and move on. And my experience has always been where I've been representing other people's points of view, so it's always difficult to not be in a situation. They have to trust you and they have to believe you, and so it's it's always the best way. And that's, as I say, you apply the sleep easy policy. If you can sleep at night, then you can usually say you've done a job that you're comfortable with.
Yep. And on that note, I'd like to thank Brett. Thank you, Brett, for your time.
Pleasure, Eric. Good to see you.
Thank you, and you too. That was Brett McCallum, who joined us for another in the series of Talking Leadership podcasts. I'll see and catch up with everyone on the next one. Thanks very much. Cheers, mate.
Bye-bye.